Today on What It's Like, a little bit different, a list of 15 cars that are rarer than the Ferrari F40. This episode exists to prove that just because it's rare doesn't always mean capital. Also, this list is going to be dealing with cars from the 50s. I'm sure the list could be longer, perhaps a sequel in the future. Also important to note that this has nothing to do with price, just a comparison on manufactured cars because it gives perspective. But with that said, you could probably buy all or most of these cars for the going current rate of what an F40 costs right now. I think I may have seen one F40 ever, but there's cars on this list that I've seen more than once. For those that don't know what the Ferrari F40 is, it was built from 1987 through 1992, which is 5 years. All the cars on this list are 1 year production with the exception of 2. Back to the F40, they also made LM and GTE race versions from 1998 through 1996. It was designed to commemorate the 40th anniversary of Ferrari and was the last Ferrari to personally get approved by the man himself, Enzo Ferrari. It was the pinnacle of what a car was in the early 90s. It was the fastest, most powerful, and most expensive car of its day. Between the years of 1987 through 1992, Ferrari only built 1,311 F40s, a 179 cubic inch displacement, which makes every source is going to tell you something different what this engine makes. It could make 480 horsepower with a twin-turbo V8 backed with a 5-speed manual, all of which for $399,150 in 1991, which would be equivalent to you spending $898,954.96 on this car now. But this car costs around $2 million. This episode is about perspective on rare cars. Starting off our list with the 1955 through 1956 Packard Caribbean. In my opinion, this is Packard's swan song. I was never a real big fan of Packard after the war because they kind of lost their way and they didn't know how to really, the market changed. But this era, by 1955, Packard finally showed up, and it's a pity that they didn't make that many of these. In 1955, underneath the hood sat a 352 cubic inch displacement V8, which was good for 275 horsepower. But in 1956, which was the last true year of Packard, got the bigger 374 cubic inch displacement V8, which was good for a healthy 310 horsepower. Packard Caribbean came standard with just about every single option available at the time. Torsion level suspension, which was pretty trick. Electronically controlled torsion bar suspension, which balanced the car's height front to rear, side to side. Said to be the smoothest of anything available in 55 or 56. If one was to sit on the fender of the rear of the car would automatically right itself so it was level. Optional twin traction control, which was their limited slip differential, reversible seat cushions, leather on one side, cloth on the other. Packard Caribbean convertible was the first car to offer air conditioning in a convertible, power windows, power steering, power brakes, power seats, heaters under the seats. You could have it in two-tone or tri-tone paint colors, dual antennas, radio, heater, has all the options and was priced at $6,000, which is equivalent to you spending $67,664.56 in the year 2024. All told, Packard made 500 copies in 1955 and only 276 copies in 1956. It's worth mentioning that Packard Caribbean was offered in a hardtop coupe as well in 1956, with only 263 being made, but altogether 1,039 units. And call me crazy, but I would rather have a Packard Caribbean than an F40. Next, we are going to the year 1958 for a personal favorite of mine, Studebaker Golden Hawk. It's worth mentioning 58 is more or less a carryover design which started in 57, and they made a lot more in 57, but 58, the United States economy saw a recession which really impacted the auto industry. The Golden Hawk was a two-door hardtop car that Studebaker produced from 1956 through 1958. It's worth mentioning that Studebaker offered a lot of different types of Hawk in 1956. We're not going to get into all of that right now, but by 1957, Silver Hawk was the alternative to the Golden Hawk, which was a pillared version. The Silver Hawk also doesn't have the supercharger, but it was produced longer from 1957 through 1961. The Piece of Resistance with the Golden Hawk. 289 cubic inch displacement, Studebaker. I have to say that because some people will think that this is a Ford engine. This engine predates the Ford engine. 289 V8 with a supercharger that puts out very healthy 275 horsepower. 1958, Studebaker switched to 14-inch wheels instead of the 15-inch wheels, which gave it a lower stance. Stuart Werner gauges. All of that could be had for around $3,280, which is equivalent to you spending $34,814.08 in the year 2024. Also from 1958, Edsel. When talking Edsel, most people will believe that the top shelf Edsel Citation convertible with only 930 made is the rarest Edsel of all time. But there are others that are rarer, like the Roundup wagon, two-door, six-passenger wagon. They only made 963 of those. Edsel was to be the fifth brand under Ford's umbrella to compete with both GM and Chrysler. With Continental stepping out its own separate brand in 1956, Edsel was only around for 3 years, 58, 59, and 60. The rarest 50s Edsel was the 1958 Edsel 9-passenger Bermuda wagon, but it's worth mentioning the rarest Edsel ever is the 1960 9-passenger Villager wagon with only 59 being produced. Sitting under the hood is a 361 cubic inch displacement V8 making a very healthy 303 horsepower. Priced at $3,212, which is equivalent to you spending $34,092.32 in the year 2024. Our next entry is from 1957 with the Pontiac Bonneville convertible, which was introduced in the spring of 1957. It was powered by a 347 cubic inch displacement V8 with Rochester fuel injection, making 317 horsepower. Bonneville carried an eye-watering $5,782, which is equivalent to you spending $63,117.63 in the year 2024, and was $2,677 more than the Star Chief convertible. That price tag got you a 4-speed hydromatic automatic transmission, power steering, power brakes, 8-way power seat, Wonder Bar radio, full leather interior, limited production, and was only sent to select Ponton dealers, with only 630 ever being produced. Next up, also from 1957, Continental Mark II, which was not a Lincoln. Continental separated from Lincoln in 1956 to bring an understated luxury motoring experience powered by a 368 cubic inch displacement Y-block, making 300 horsepower. It's worth mentioning this car was made from 1956 through 1957. They made way more copies in 56. 57, they didn't make as many. This car has all of the options, the only option being air conditioning. Price tag with everything but air conditioning was $9,700, which would be equivalent to you spending $105,887.41 in the year 2024. If you got air conditioning, it would push the price tag past $10,000. It was the most expensive car made in America until Cadillac upped it with the Cadillac Eldorado Brougham. 1957 Continental only made 444 copies. We are going to the year 1953. GM had a line of custom convertibles to commemorate the 53rd year of business and 5 years of the Motorama. Buick Skylark, Cadillac Eldorado, and Oldsmobile Fiesta, which is the rarest of the three, with only 458 copies ever being made. Its rarity may be linked to the limited or lack of promotional material. The Oldsmobile featured wraparound windshield, leather upholstery, Ultronic Eye, which was the automatic headlight dimmer, backup lights, power brakes, power steering, hydraulic windows, and hydraulic front seat. heater, defroster, Wonderbar radio, all for $5,715, which was equivalent to you $65,657.43 in the year 2024, powered by a modified 303 cubic inch displacement rocket V8, which was rated at 170 horsepower, coupled to a 4-speed hydromatic automatic transmission. It's worth mentioning the Oldsmobile Fiesta was a 1-year only product. The Skylark and Eldorado continued. Also from 1953, this was the first American car to use fiberglass for all of the body panels of the car. And it's not the Corvette, but the Kaiser Darrin, first making its appearance at the Los Angeles Motorama in September of '52. With positive response from both the media and the public, the Darrin was dubbed the sports car everybody was waiting on. Come spring of '53, the car was unveiled at the New York Auto Show. First deliveries were to be in autumn of '53, but production experienced some setbacks. The car wasn't ready until January the following year. The Kaiser Darrin was powered by an F-head Hurricane, which isn't a flat head. The F-head used a different valve arrangement with intake valves in the head and exhaust valves in the block, producing 90 horsepower. The Darrin used sliding doors. Choice of automatic or manual transmission. Cost of $3,668, which is equivalent to you spending $41,826.93 in the year 2024. Only 435 were ever produced. Going back to 1958 with the most expensive car America offered in the 50s, built in numbers, Cadillac Eldorado Brougham. This was Cadillac's answer to the Continental Mark II, sold for only 2 years, just like the Mark II. Being sold from 1957 through 1958, the Eldorado Brougham was powered by a 365 cubic inch displacement V8, making 335 horsepower, backed with a 4-speed hydromatic automatic. Unlike the Continental Mark II, this car had 4 doors instead of 2 and featured all options like self-leveling air suspension, new low-profile tires, stainless steel roof. There were switches in the doors that wouldn't let the car start if any doors were open, Ultronic Eye, which was their automatic headlight dimmer, central locking system, trunk lid, which could be operated remotely, air conditioning, heat under seats, 6-way power seat with programmable driver's seat, power windows, power vent windows, power steering, power brakes, power everything, all for the hefty price of $13,074, which is equivalent to you spending $138,768.07 in the year 2024. Up next, going back to 1953 with the original Corvette, Chevy wanted to get into the sports car segment, joining the Nash Healey and Kaiser Darrin. Even though the Kaiser Darrin was to be the first car built of fiberglass, this was the first production car built of fiberglass. The first C1 Corvette drove off the assembly line in June of 1953, making it the first American production car to be made of fiberglass. Nestled under the hood of the Corvette was the 235 cubic inch displacement Blue Flame inline 6, making 150 horsepower, backed with a 2-speed power glide. It's worth mentioning, this is the first year that the 235 is fully pressurized in the oiling system department. AM radio and heater were optional, but all 53 Corvettes left the factory with them. Only 300 were produced in 1953, all of which were polo white with red interiors, black top, were essentially hand-built, so no two are the same. Priced at $3,490, which is equivalent to you spending $40,095.26 in the year 2024. Up next, my favorite wagons of all time. I'm talking AMC Ambassador Cross Country Wagon. But you may have not known that they made a hardtop version from 1958 through 1960 in very low production numbers for each year. 59 had the most with 578, followed by 60 with 435, but 1958 saw the least copies at 294 units. It's also important to note the hardtop wagon was also available in Rambler form, and the Rambler was the first one that offered a hardtop wagon, period, beginning in 1956, as a response to the Chevy Nomad. Powering this super underrated mystical beast was AMC's legendary 327 V8, the same engine used in the Rambler Rebel, 270 horsepower on tap, and a choice of transmissions. According to concept cars, only 2 hardtop wagons from 1958 are known to survive. We're getting down here now. The next car was built between the years 1949 through 1954, called the Muntz Jet. It could be powered by either a Cadillac or a Lincoln V8. Either one was good for 160 horsepower. You could either have the GM Hydromatic on the Cadillac cars, which was a 4-speed automatic, or a 3-speed Borg Warner manual. It's also worth mentioning that the Cadillac-powered bodies were built of aluminum, whereas the Lincoln-powered bodies used steel. Muntz Jet came standard with padded dash, seatbelts way before the competition, all-leather tuck-and-roll, interior racing Stewart Warner gauges, center console Muntz radio. There was a really cool option for a liquor cabinet under rear armrest. In 1953, a Muntz Jet cost $5,500, which is equivalent to you spending $63,187.38 in the year 2024. From the years 1949 through 1954, only 198 cars were produced, and the company lost over $1,500 on each one produced. We are going back to 1958, where Packard made the list again. 1958 was Packard's last year before Studebaker pulled the plug, which is ironic because it was a Packard takeover of Studebaker when the merge happened in 1954. Anyway, 1958, Packard offered a wagon, which they only made 159 of, which was the 9-passenger wagon. Under the hood sits a Studebaker 289 V8, which is capable of 225 horsepower, priced at $3,384, which is equivalent to you spending $35,917.94 in the year 2024. We are now down to the top 3. The next one is a hybrid, but it's an old definition of a hybrid. American running gear and an Italian-built body called the Dual-Ghia. Built from 1956 through 1958. We did a whole episode on the Dual-Ghia, so if you want to know more about it, definitely a cool episode. It was one of the highlights of my year, and we got to go for a ride in it. Anyway, Dual-Ghia was essentially a concept car turned into a very limited production car designed by Luigi Segre with possible influences from our boy Virgil Exner. And in a way, you could say that this was Chrysler's expensive Halo high luxury car to compete with both Continental Mark II and the Eldorado Brougham, because under the hood was either a 315 cubic inch displacement polyhead V8, which was capable of 218 horsepower, or 361 V8, 260 horsepower. Dodge would ship the frame and drivetrain to Italy, where the body and interior work was fabricated at Ghia. Then it would get shipped to Dual Motors for final assembly. This car was exclusive, with only 117 ever made, and it was cheaper than both the Continental Mark II and the Eldorado Brougham at $7,600, which would be equivalent to $82,963.33 in the year 2024. For our next entry, we are going back to 1958. This is not really a car, but an engine. It was the most powerful V8 that you could buy in the 50s, and it was the first American car made to match the Duesenberg Model SSJ, which came 2 decades prior, which they only made 2 of those. Mercury Marauder is the engine. 430 cubic inch displacement, MEL, or Mercury Edsel Lincoln. That's the engine family. Super Marauder V8, which is good for 400 horsepower. It could be had in the Mercury Park Lane, Montclair convertible, Turnpike cruiser, and wagons. Only 100 were ever ordered with this engine. 100 total. At number 1, any guesses? Any guesses at all? Going once? Going twice? 1 year into the future, 1959, DeSoto Adventurer convertible. 1959 was the beginning of the end for DeSoto, in my opinion. To me, this car is classified as BF before fugly. They got graciously ugly and sales tanked, and then they would shutter in 1961. Anyway, powering this beast was a 383 cubic inch displacement V8 pumping out 350 horsepower. with a price tag of $4,749, which is equivalent to you spending $50,059.68 in year 2024. Only 97 copies were made in convertible flavor. All right, now it's time for Would You Rather. 3 scenarios today of all the cars on this list. Which one would you rather have? Yes, you could choose the Ferrari F40 if you want to, and I probably would, just so I could buy every single car on this list. Anyway, moving on to the second scenario. These are not fair. 1957 Cadillac Eldorado Brougham, or 1957 Dual-Ghia, or 1957 Continental Mark II, or 1956 Packard Caribbean convertible. I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. Moving on to the final scenario, 1958 Mercury Marauder powered car of your choice, or 1958 AMC cross country hardtop wagon, or 1958 Studebaker Golden Hawk, or 1957 Pontiac Bonneville convertible. Once again, I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. Now it's time for Name That Tune. First person to get both the name of the band and the song title correctly in the comment section will have their comment pinned to the top of it. Thank you all so much for coming out and watching this. If you'd like to get in touch with me, shoot me a comment in the comment section below, or check out our Facebook group that correlates with this YouTube channel. I call it the After Party. It gives you the opportunity to share your rides, stories, experiences. Anything car related is shareable on there. If you don't have Facebook and would still like to reach me, send me an email. All of that information will be linked in the description below. Just know I appreciate everything that you guys bring in the comment section. I love reading the stories and comments pertaining to each car that we feature here on the channel. Till next time, toodaloo!